So, Professor Dominique Hanssens, welcome to us. What are the three most important empirical generalizations in marketing, in your point of view?
In my point of view, they have at least the part of marketing that I'm interested in. It would be the generalizations about the effect of specific marketing actions on business performance, and then separately the effects of specific assets like brand assets and customer assets that companies create. Again, the effect on business performance. Those two categories.
Okay. And you're also concerned with us understanding to use a specific metric in order to be able to compare these effects.
That's correct, yeah.
Could you tell us a bit?
Well, in order for this material to be relevant for decision making, you have to be able to calculate how strong is the effect.
Exactly.
So, for example, if I say advertising increases sales, well, that may be interesting, but that's not enough.
Nope.
You need to be able to say, well, by how much? So that you can compare the investment with the anticipated result.
It's a popular myth, I think, in marketing that marketing communication is very effective. But what is the general elasticity of marketing or advertising?
If we focus on advertising, then the average elasticity, and this has been done hundreds of times, again, it's an average, is about 0.1. So that means if you increase your budget by 100%, on average, your sales, not your profits, your sales go up by 10%.
Yeah. And that is a key learning for a lot of marketers in real life, I think.
Yes, yes, it is.
So if you were rather to invest them somewhere else with in another piece of the marketing tool chest, where would you put those same investments?
Well, it could be in sales promotion, like giving a better deal to your customers. It could be in building distribution, having your product more available, your product or service in different locations. It could be in product quality, increasing customer satisfaction. It could be in lower prices. So those are some other ways in which you can invest some of your marketing dollars.
Good. In what ways would you say that the coming of the digital age or the existence of the digital age and the information society is changing any of these generalizations?
Yes. It's an important question on the minds of many people, of course, in the industry. It is changing it in some ways, but not in all ways. Okay, so for example, with respect to advertising, as you mentioned earlier, not that much is changing in overall spending levels. And the reason is that while these new media may be very effective for certain categories, for certain products or sectors, they are not changing the fundamental economics of how much you should advertise your products, which remains to be approximately 3% of revenue overall, again, as an average. But what is changing, of course, is the allocation. So if your customers move away from, let's say, print media to digital media, well, then your dollars have to follow that. That's quite clear.
Yeah. So you would not advise companies to stop doing TV advertising and putting everything into social media?
No, I would not.
Why is that?
Well, that is because, first of all, in the case of TV advertising, it fulfills an important role not only in direct response, but also it can be used as an instrument for follow-up. So, in other words, the first contact that the consumer has with your product or service could be through a TV ad, but then there can be follow-up, for example, through the web. Okay, so that maybe the TV advertising is not the ultimate response, but it helps alleviate the response to other media such as web or other digital media. That's the example with respect to TV advertising. And then in general, again, people have information needs, but the total amount of needs that they have don't necessarily change that much. It's just the allocation to different channels that changes.
Yeah. You had several interesting examples, one of those being that the amount changed. The amount spent on advertising in general was like 3% in the 1960s and still is 3%
it's
now.
Remarkably stable.
It's remarkably stable.
Right.
I guess you also, in your interactions with business practitioners, you meet some myths, that assumptions they have about generalizations that are simply not true.
Yes.
Can you think of any myth that we really need to fight with our true empirical generalizations?
Well, it tends to be that those elements in marketing that are most visible to people tend to get the most attention. Okay. Mm-hmm. So, for example, people like to talk about advertising because they see it all the time. Mm-hmm. And so they make the assumption it must be very strong. Okay. And there is a bit of a feeling that, for example, the influence of a sales call, which is much less visible. Because if you have a sales call, then of course one person is the subject to that call, but nobody else knows about that sales call. Okay. But if you look at the effectiveness of advertising versus the effectiveness of sales calls are much more effective. Okay, and so there is sometimes a misunderstanding that we exaggerate the effects of things we know and experience as consumers, and we give less weight to things that are much less visible, but still very important.
And some of the myths I hear, one of them is that in the age of digital, brands will die. What is your response to that?
Yeah, well, the influence of brands is certainly changing. Okay, but they're not dying. Okay, what is changing is the following: that people have more ways now to get access to information about products and services than they used to. People have always been interested in quality products, but now it's so easy to make comparisons, be it quality comparisons or price comparisons or customer service comparisons, by a variety of media that now provided online. Okay. And as a result, the importance of that factor is growing relative to the fact that you're, let's say, a well-known brand name. Okay. That importance, it's still there, but it's going down a bit as a result of the trends that I've just described.
If you could give a fresh CMO one piece of advice, what should he follow? Or
I would say,
follow?
yeah, he or she, I would say keep a close eye on the data.
Yeah.
In other words, of course, everybody will have their prior experiences, and those are very important. But invest in good data about your business, about the various engagements or actions that your company or brand engages in, about the response to these actions, and try to figure out what moves the needle, so to speak, and stay close to the data and close to the customer, and don't necessarily rely on the fact that you're a big brand, so nothing's going to change. It will change.
And get used to thinking elasticities.
Yes, for those that's the next level with the elasticities. When you know something about response metrics, that's one metric of effectiveness that I like to use because it's so easy to apply.
And it can easily also be transferred between categories, and you can learn
Absolutely.
a lot.
Yeah, because it's a percent change metric, percent change in performance divided by percent change in efforts. If one person is in the computer business and another one is in the tourism business, you can actually make comparisons of effectiveness of what they do because it's just percent changes, and it applies to any unit of observation.
Yeah. And that can perhaps lead us to learn more efficiently from other categories.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
We should do that more. Yeah.
Yes, I do believe so.
Thank you, Professor Hanssens, for joining us. Thank you for your very insightful contributions.
Thank you.